Great. Well, thank you for joining today, guys. Lovely to see you all. I'm going to let people keep on coming into the room. I'm going to hit share on my screen and find some slides. I've been looking forward to this one, actually, because this is going to be this should be a good topic, actually, I think. A good one to discuss. So, thanks very much for joining. Wednesday, 4th of May. May the 4th be with you if you're into all of that stuff. And today we're going to talk about this concept, this expression that we hear all the time: safety is our number one priority, or safety is the most important thing, or whatever synonym of that you can come up with, and delve into that a bit and see how true it is, and if it's not true, what can we do to actually kind of try and get to that kind of objective. So I'm going to share some thoughts with you, but then I'll be really interested to get your feedback as well, obviously. Always keen for these to be interactive. So I'm going to start by sharing a story with you from an experience that I had. So I was working with an insurance broker, visiting a number of sites for a pub and nightclub and restaurant chain, big business, big national business. And we were doing some surveys to go and look at the slip, trip, fall risks. And we ended up in this one particular venue here, which is in Birmingham. And as you can see from the photos, they've got some small steps, they've got some shiny and smooth floors, it's going to be dark in there, right, because it's a nightclub. There's bound to be spillages on the floor, people are going to be inebriated, so we've got a lot of challenges in terms of managing slip, trip, fall risks in that venue. But the manager had been there for, I think, over 10 years, and she really knew her venue. She knew where people try to sneak in. She knew where drinks would get left. She knew where drinks would get spilled. She knew everything about that because she'd been living it and breathing it for so long. And what she knew was, in her experience, there was a particular product which was like a spill pad. There's a photo of it here, and this really worked for her in her experience, in her view. Because of the type of venue it is, she couldn't stop the floor getting wet, right? But what she could do using this product was her opinion. She could react to a spillage quickly. She could put this down on the floor, and that would prevent or reduce the risk of somebody having an accident. The only problem is, as she told us, I can't buy these products because my regional manager says it's beyond our budget and we can't afford it. So this is a great example of one of the challenges we see a lot, which is silos, and I sort of deem this to be a vertical silo problem rather than a horizontal silo. So horizontal silos would be, construction doesn't talk to facilities management, doesn't talk to safety, doesn't talk to operations, doesn't talk to procurement, business units not speaking with each other and collaborating. A vertical silo, which I think is more relevant to this topic we're discussing today, is where the board might say or think or believe or desire one thing, but as you get down deep into the trenches of the business, the reality is that desire, that wish, is not being carried out for whatever reason. And in this case, it was an area manager who I guess was incentivized on P&L, not wanting to spend money. But if you've got somebody at head office saying words to the effect of safety is our number one priority, and decisions like this are being made in the real world on the ground, then there's something not quite right about that. So that's a live story, just kind of illustrating this topic from my perspective. So what we're going to cover today is the problem about thinking about safety as our number one priorities. Think about some solutions and talk about some examples. I'm going to do that first quickly for 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, and then we'll have, as always, an open discussion. Love to get your views on this. Quickly about me, for those of you that don't know me, I do three big bits of content every week. I do this roundtable, I do a podcast, and a newsletter as well. My expertise is in the field of slips, trips, and falls. I've worked on some high-profile cases in that arena. The business that I lead has won some awards, and we work with some notable and big clients. What gets us really excited is actually doing stuff with our clients hands-on in the field. So that pub visit was an example, and we've done that in over 5,000 venues over the last few years. And at last count, we're saving about £10 million of slip, trip, fall claims a year. So safety geek, but specialising in slips, trips, and falls. So now I'm going to be honest here. I'm more partial to a Big Mac than a KFC, but I'm not picking here on the Colonel himself. This message, particularly since the pandemic, we've been seeing this messaging from all sorts of brands everywhere. Our number one priority is your safety, primarily designed to entice customers back through the door, or I suppose to entice staff to join and stay. So I'm not picking on the Colonel here. I could find countless examples of this, but here's the problem. Firstly, we say it, but do we really mean it? So the board of a business might say safety's our number one priority. The Colonel here is saying that, KFC is saying it, but is that true? Do they really mean that, or are they just saying it? Is what we're saying incongruent to our actions? So I found a few books here with book front covers of this one cartoon to illustrate these points. But that's the first problem, I think, with this notion of safety being our number one priority. The second example, which is kind of brought to life by the pub case study I mentioned, is perhaps we do mean it. So perhaps the board really does prioritise safety. Perhaps they really do put that above everything else. But do we actually live it? Do we breathe it? Do we walk the walk rather than just talking the talk? So yeah, this book here, live like you mean it. So there's another potential problem with this expression, this philosophy. And then I suppose the third thing is, isn't this just an oxymoron anyway? Can safety really be a business's number one priority unless they're a health and safety business? If you're a manufacturing business, can safety be your number one priority? Is it possible that that's your number one priority? Or is actually your number one priority to make a return for your shareholders? Is it to drive growth? Is it to be efficient? So, can we really say this? Isn't it just an expression that we use that we don't really believe is even possible? So what I'd say on this is, if safety really is the number one priority, so if we say this, we really believe it, we want to act it out, we want to deliver that, then I just don't see how we can do it, because we're basically going to have to put every single person into a bubble like this. We're going to have to put every single piece of equipment into some kind of bubble. We're not going to take any risks. We're not going to do anything at all unless we're 100% certain that we can do it safely and without any risk. And so I just don't think it's feasible that in most businesses, perhaps all businesses, safety can be the number one priority. We'll be interested to get your views on this in a minute. So if we accept that as the premise, then that safety can't be number one priority, what can we do to try to achieve the spirit of that expression, but perhaps be a bit more literal and a bit more achievable about it? So I think the first thing is obviously what we say. So if we're saying safety is our number one priority, then what we're actually saying, if we take it at face value, is that we care more about safety than profit, than growth, than stability, than brand, than reputation, than efficiency, than all these other things in the business. As I say, I don't really think that that's a particularly credible thing to say. So, what we need to be doing is not saying that safety is our number one priority, but that safety is on an equal footing with all of these other things. So it's important, but it's perhaps not our number one priority. Secondly, what we do. So if we're going to have this message that safety is important, then we need to back this up, right? So there's no point saying safety is important or safety is a priority or safety is our number one priority if we don't invest in it properly, if we don't communicate why we're taking that view, if we don't communicate how we expect people to, we want people to deliver on that, if we don't support people in doing that. So, if we say to somebody, safety's got to be number one, you can't do your job unless you feel 100% safe, and then they don't do their job because they don't feel 100% safe. We can't then be telling them off. And we've got to collaborate. We've got to work with key stakeholders inside and outside the business to actually try and achieve these outcomes in a better way. So we can't be working in these kind of silos that we talked about before. And then I suppose going back to a topic we discussed the other week, what we measure as well. So what are the KPIs we're going to use? How are we thinking about efficiency? How are we thinking about outcomes? And we need to tie all of this together, these three pieces, into a strategy for us to get to this desire that safety is important, or even to strive for it being our number one priority if we think that's realistic. But these are the three areas that I think we need to focus on. And we're going to talk about this in another roundtable in a few weeks. Actually, the Alcoa case study. But Paul O'Neill, who led Alcoa for a number of years and was really very heavily focused on safety, he's got a good quote which I love: "Safety is not a priority; it's a precondition." So that's a slightly different way of saying it. It's probably a more accurate way of saying it. It's a more achievable way of saying it. And I would put it to you that that is a better way forward. So in the spirit of safety is our number one priority, let's not think of it as a priority. Let's think of it as a precondition. So in other words, it's critical, it's important. It is a priority, I suppose, but it's not the priority. But we can't do anything else unless we've got safety. Safety needs to be embedded, it needs to be communicated well, it needs to be a key component of every single thing that we do. And if it is, we'll get the right outcomes, which are the spirit of the platitudes, I suppose, of saying safety's our number one priority. So that's my view. Let's open it up. Really interested to hear what you guys think about this. How have you confronted this before? If you've been in a business where the MD says to you, safety's our number one priority, but then they don't give you any budget and they don't support you in making decisions to make your business safer. How do you deal with that? Maybe what have you tried to achieve this kind of change that hasn't worked, and we can learn from that. And really interested to know what you think as a profession we can do in the way that we communicate and influence to improve the situation as well. So I'm going to stop sharing. The way to do this is go into reactions and raise your hand. And I can see that David's got his hand up. So David, over to you.
Yeah, morning everyone. This is something we're battling with right at the moment. Restore, the company I work for, had a fatality 4 years ago. That has driven a reaction, as you would hope and expect. But I suppose that's the sort of point. There's now a sort of expectation placed both on, and probably felt by my CEO, but also by the board, that actually safety must be the number one priority. I really love that quote from Paul O'Neill, because I think that's absolutely where we need to be, that safety is a precondition. But it's an interesting point here, is that it's not just what we mean and what we say, but it's also what's expected of us. And I think a CEO who turns around and says that safety has no comment about safety would be looked at quite dimly by the investors in the company. So there is a very difficult tightrope to walk here for the board and for CEOs in terms of how do they approach this problem, because as we're seeing in your example from KFC, that's an expectation. That message is a message that you want people to feel that they will be safe. But whether it's actually true or not is different, and there is an expectation management piece that needs to be sort of thought about, I think. But I really love that quote from Paul O'Neill. It's something I'll take away as I build my strategy. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. Yeah, I think it's like anything in life, isn't it? I've got a business, right, and I'm trying to grow my business. I'm trying to get people's attention to focus on the problem of slips and falls. You guys have your own problems in your business, but it's all about how do you engage and how do you influence people. And I think if you consider the last general election, it all came down to a 3-word saying, didn't it, of get Brexit done. Whatever side of the argument or Brexit argument you stand on, I'm definitely not going to talk about that today. But it was a very clear, very concise, very simple message that everybody could understand. And so you can see the attraction of that by saying safety is our number one priority in our world. But just as get Brexit done perhaps wasn't 100% accurate, shall we say? Safety's our number one priority perhaps isn't 100% accurate either. So yeah. I think it's always that balance between something that's clear and understandable, and actually something that's deliverable as well. And as you say, managing those expectations.
There's one comeback. I know, sorry, Otto, I do apologise for jumping in, but I think one of the other things here is when, certainly for me, with my CEO turning around and saying, this is above profit, the challenge is back to me, which is, okay, how do I keep his feet to the fire on this? How do I get him to show the business that is exactly what he means? How do I make him live it? So there's a challenge back to me on how do I do that.
And also, I think, should it be above profit? Because it's interesting thinking about the discussion at the moment about the windfall tax, isn't it, on oil companies? You've got to make a profit in a business, otherwise you can't invest in growth and you can't invest in safety and you can't afford to keep people safe. So I think there's an interesting discussion to have there as well. Who was next? There's 2 people with their hands up. I think you're second, aren't you, Douglas? Doug?
Yeah, I was.
Do you want to go, Otto Rickbo? Are you there? You look frozen. She looks frozen. Oh, Doug, come on.
Sorry, having problems with the unmute button. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, I mean, any organisation I've worked in, I would always encourage people not to say safety is a number one priority, because I think then you're starting out with something that isn't true. But, because as you said, no organisation can have it as their number one priority. And I think the issue around profit is interesting as well, because you can certainly put safety above profit, but you shouldn't put safety above ensuring you still have a company. So there's a difference between the oil companies raking in millions of pounds and them making mass redundancies and layoffs because their business model isn't sustainable. And I think the other thing is it's very much at the heart of all health and safety. I mean, it's what is reasonably practicable. It is how the vast majority of health and safety is framed. So it's kind of implicit in that it's not the top thing you do, it's balanced against a lot of other things. And I think, as you say, it's something people like to say. I personally think, a statement of safety as a number one priority brings the culture of the organization into question a little bit. Because if they're saying that and not living it, it points to, you know, a poor safety culture.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, how have you sort of tried to address that in your career?
I think the difficulty can be is when you're sort of early in your career, you don't really get much choice, do you?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to toe the corporate line. I think it's about sort of honesty in your dealings with people. So, you know, you've got to sort of set out a realistic thing. You know, your health and safety policy statement is the start, and it should be realistic and accurate. You know, and if it says we will provide resources to reduce health and safety, you know, then that's what people need to do. So I think it's about that honesty piece and saying, actually, where does health and safety sit within your priorities? You know, and then if honestly it isn't where it should be, you can start trying to deal with that. I mean, it's David's point with the, you know, the CEO. It's okay if you mean it. What does that actually mean? You know, are you doubling the health and safety team size? Are you, you know, investing in training for all managers? What does that actually mean to the person? Because it's easy to say, it's hard to live it.
Yeah. Very, very good point. Very good point. Great stuff. And Andy, I know you had your hand up on screen rather than virtually, so go on, you go ahead.
Well, in my previous life, when I worked at Loughborough University in the chemistry lab, one of the biggest issues we had was the students were not safety conscious enough, even though the academics said you must do this, you must do that. A number of times we ended up mopping up floors because they hadn't fastened the tubes onto condensers, and water went splashing everywhere on the floor, which in a chemistry lab is not a clever thing. If you slip and you're walking around with a bottle of acid in your hand, you could get yourself injured and injure everybody else. So I think the biggest problem is also that there isn't enough of a safety culture in schools that will prepare them to be safety aware, that students have got a duty of care not only towards themselves but to everybody else that's walking around them. And I think one of the biggest issues we've had in my place of work was also dark staircases where people also fell down the stairs. So it's one of those things of not only people's responsibilities, but also the organisation department itself being a lot more safety aware. We had a case not very long before I retired with somebody fell down the stairs, and lo and behold, a week or two after that incident, the safety department came in, did the slip test, and saw that the stairs weren't as safe as what they could have been. And also the lighting in that particular area was dodgy. So it's all a cumulative effect. So organisations, be it private sector or public sector, need to take a rigid approach to that and really do proper risk assessments to find out where the big issues are and then address them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if you're going to set your stall out that you know, this is most important, or one of the very most important things we're doing, then you've got to do it properly, right? So there's that challenge of walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Thanks, Andy. Chris, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yep. Morning, everyone. So I think kind of the way, I mean, Douglas is right, and you know, to a certain extent, you've got a corporate line, and I'm currently working in an organisation which still has, you know, kind of a target zero, which I suppose is another kind of contentious tagline, depending on your viewpoint. But I mean, kind of from my experience going through different sectors, so I've kind of worked offshore, oil and gas, all these kind of things, where you have to be quite open and honest. And I think we can say that safety, you know, like we do have to say that safety is a priority. But like you say, I think it has to be a balance, and it's never a constant state. So what I would always say to kind of anyone who was coming to visit a site that I was working on, or a location or a vessel, is you know, certain things will become priority at different times. So you know, you can never say it's you know, this is number one, that's number two, and they stay like that forever. So we used to always just say, you know, if you are coming on, there are certain elements and certain stages of operations and projects where the safety has to be the number one priority, because you know it's more high risk, or we're going into an area which is more dangerous, or so on and so forth. So I think you kind of, you know, your priority has to be something which is slightly fluid and maybe a little bit, you know, fluctuates depending on what operation you're actually completing at the time.
Yeah.
So that's generally the way I would put it across to people, is no, safety isn't our number one priority all the time, but at certain points in certain situations, then it has to be.
Yeah, I think that's a good balanced way of putting it across, isn't it? I suppose in those sectors that you're in as well, you know, if something goes wrong, it's catastrophically wrong. So it's got to be.
Yeah, and I suppose what you get as well is you also get, should we say, people are slightly, I mean, I think in all industry, but people are skeptical. If you try and sell them it as snake oil, you know, that safety is going to solve everything, then you know you quite quickly get called out on it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Speaking of safety solving everything, I'm just going to share quickly what we're talking about next week, which isn't that safety solves everything, but what we're going to talk about next week is is some of the outcomes that that you can get by implementing a proactive safety and risk management strategy. So I've coined this as the 4 Ps. I'm not going to spoil it for you. You're going to have to join us next week to get involved in that. But this is all about, you know, if we get this right, what are the business outcomes we can achieve? And I think this is going to help that conversation around, you know, positioning safety and risk correctly so that it is important, because we're able to demonstrate and quantify some of the benefits of doing it well. So look forward to seeing everybody next week for that. Kathy, how are you today?
Yes, I'm grand. Thank you very much. And it's interesting listening to people talking about, particularly for last one for Chris, about the fact that priorities aren't fixed, because that's always the biggest rail against that I have when people do the classic safety is our number one priority. It's, well, if it's a number one priority, then it suddenly can come 5, 6, 7, whatever. So it can't always, as you say, be the most important thing. But something in particular that I always focus on is actually the language, because the shift we've had quite recently is to stop talking about safety, but talking about being safe, keep people safe, doing things safely. Because of, as you say, that intangible word safety, you know, you say to somebody, oh, drive safely, hope you get home safe. Nobody's going to go, oh, for goodness sake, health and safety gone mad. But the minute you hear the word safety, it's high-vis jackets, clipboards, and you're spoiling our fun, and, you know, you're stopping us killing ourselves in new and ingenious ways every day. And there's a lot around that. You know, we've got our safety culture survey, and so, you know, we've, for the first time, we've had a safety brand logo, which may not sound a lot, but for a massive big organization, when we had a new safety director come in, his view was, hang on a minute, what do you mean you don't have some wording around how you work safely? What do you mean you don't have this visible preference and presence around what being safe means to you? So things like, you know, a simple thing of having work safe, home safe, everybody. It means that it gives people something to start hanging their conversations on. And the other challenge we have is actually trying to talk with our comms professionals on messaging to stop starting everything with your safety is our number one priority, because as I said to them, you can just save those words in your message, because everyone's going to skip to the next sentence because you've just created visual wallpaper. And it's those sort of challenges that it's also the thing of not doing the massive announcements of, due to, you know, our concern your safety, we've spent, you know, £27 million on a new working from height system. Actually, It's just talking about bringing in the new ways of working, because if you've got to prioritize something, then you haven't planned it. So safety being, oh, and here comes the science, here comes the safety, is everything else, oh yeah, and work safe. No, that's wrong, because how you work is how you work, and your safety is part of that. If you've got to have a section that says in your work instructions, safety, you've done it wrong, because your safety is your stick of rock. It's not a priority. It's in every line of everything you write.
Yeah,
So
running
it's
through.
that sort of thing for me. It's much more, it's something that gets overlooked, is the language of being safe.
Yeah, very interesting. I talk a lot about trying to leave people feeling safer. So, not safety, but feeling safer. And that's kind of the way that I position what I do. It's trying to, with the kind of educational content and stuff, it's just trying to give people that feeling that they know a bit more, and therefore they feel safer because they've got more knowledge and more skills, and then if they can implement some of that stuff, that should make their colleagues feel safer because they can see and feel the improvements and so on. So I think kind of a similar point that you're making, but
yeah, and it's the benefits as well of it's the work safe, home safe, and we actually quite often tie in that with the what you learn at home, what you learn at work. Those things both impact each other. So particularly when it comes to slips, trips and falls, the techniques you're going to learn for work are going to be the same techniques that will keep you safe at home.
Yeah.
And that actually sometimes has the biggest buck and biggest bang, particularly when you've got we have a wide age demographic, and we have different focuses now on outcomes as well from harm.
Yeah.
So that's been quite interesting as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Funny enough, I don't think I've mentioned this on the roundtable before. I'm going to put a link in the chat because I'm running a survey at the moment. I'll show you what it looks like. It's and it's all about. If you follow the link, it's this here, and it takes 3 or 4 minutes. This says 5 minutes, doesn't take that long. But we're just trying to get people's views on what's important and what are the trends and things like that. So if everybody could spend a couple of minutes doing that, then I'd really appreciate it. I'll pop a link into the email that I send out as well to everybody after the roundtable. Kevin, you've got your hand up. How are you doing this week?
I'm okay, Christian. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Good. Just to have a couple of thoughts on what everybody's saying around language and things like that. And it got me thinking, what David was saying about, they had a fatality a few years ago. And, I've been there as well, sadly. And it's not a very nice experience because especially as a safety professional, the first thing you do is look inwards at what did I miss? What did I miss? And it's very difficult. And all too often we didn't miss anything. But what I'm thinking is, when it comes to like Kathy was saying there about language and how we react to incidents, when it comes to safety being our number one priority, if something negative like that does happen, I think the way that we react or an organization reacts is absolutely critical. Because if the blame game starts to come out immediately, if a situation happens, then you're already on the back foot, and then you're already sending those negative messages about safety. Actually, profit is more important. I mean, or safety is not as important. But so it's how we react to positive and negative situations when they arise, and the language that we're using when we're doing those investigations. The fact that we're not just looking for blame, okay, and the fact that it's actually the management team and the board of directors and the senior teams do demonstrate that they actually care that people don't get hurt. I don't think anybody would dispute that a company can't make profit. Otherwise a company's not going to be in business very long if they're not making profit. But and there's a term that I used to use with the directors that I've worked with previously, and it was, we just need to make safety I know it sounds cliche, but safety is what we do around here. It's just inherent. It's just built into the activities that we do. And I've had success with that in the past is building the programs and building the safe work practices and, the risk assessments and the method statements and all the tick box exercises, building them around what the teams actually do in the field. And how many, we spoke about this before, how often do we actually engage the people on the ground when we're building these systems. How often do we actually get them involved and go, how do you actually do the job? Do you have a better idea of how you can do the job? So everybody, we can learn from them, because we might be safety and health practitioners, okay, you know, and experts in that field, but I'm not an expert electrician. I'm not an expert, you know, drill rig operator. You know, I mean, I've worked in the industries, but the people on the ground are the ones that are going to know how they're going to get hurt, and how often do we actually ask them that? And I think that by taking it down to that grassroots level, that's when we show our commitment to safety. You know, as the board of directors walking down and speaking to people on a safety walk, and, you know, going, how could you get hurt today? Not, can I have a look at your permit? Can I check your risk assessment? Because, you know, or, you know, but actually, how do you feel that you could get hurt today in this job? Do you feel that there's anything that we can do to support you more? And bringing it down to that safety is personal level, rather than just, you know, safety is what we do around here. And, you know, safety is priority, which I don't think anybody really believes that anyway. And it's just lip service, but actually making it personal, making it about the people and involving the people in how can we help you to make sure you go home safely to your families at the end of today, at the end of the shift, at the end of the rotation, whatever it might be. And it's, again, as I've always said, and we always discuss, bring it back to the person, bring it back to the people. We don't want you to get hurt. We want you to go home safely, but we also, you know, we need to make money so we can pay your salary. I think it's as simple as that, basically. Yeah. And at the end of the day, nobody goes to work to have an accident. So if somebody is having an accident or situations are happening, there has to be a reason for that. So ask your workforce.
Yeah.
And that's my 2 pence for today, Christian.
No, that's great. Much appreciated, as always. I always think that we need to do more asking of questions, and I think that is with all of the key stakeholders. So absolutely, it's with the frontline teams doing the jobs, but I also think that we need to have a more of a partnership approach with other key stakeholders as well. So, you know, your insurance company, it's amazing how often you know, things are happening and they're not being checked in by the insurance company, where, you know, they're to help you if things go wrong, but also that they want to support you to reduce risks and accidents and claims as well. And we're going to talk about that in a few weeks on the roundtable actually as well, how to unlock some funding from your insurers to do that. But your lawyers, but your local authority, the enforcement officers, you know, we should be actually engaging with all of these stakeholders to try to, your suppliers, to try to get the right results in this area, I think. And I feel as if that's one thing that we could certainly do better, you know, be a bit less insular and a bit more.
I completely agree, Christian. And it goes back to that whole safety policeman mentality, doesn't it? You know, when the safety guy rocks up on site, and then it's like, oh, as Kathy was saying, here's the guy with the clipboard, here's the guy with the rules, you know, and it should be more of a coached mentality, and as you say, a partnership. And what can we do to make sure you go home safely today? Not where's this, where's that, why haven't you done that? And I think historically, as professionals, the industry that we're in has always been perceived as very negative, you know, and very enforceful. And people don't like being told what to do. People like being involved in how to make situations better. And I just, yeah, be more of a safety coach rather than a safety policeman.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, just again, you know, that's kind of what next week's topic is about. These 4 Ps are all about the benefits of getting this right and enabling us to sort of sell, should we say, the benefits to the other stakeholders. Chris, I'm going to take your intervention, and then probably we're coming against time, so we'll probably, unless anyone else wants to desperately dive in, we'll probably wrap up after that.
It's very brief. I couldn't agree more with what Chris and Kevin were saying, and others clearly. I mean, my view on safety and going to site and having the clipboard and all the rest of it, I will still do that. I'll still go to site, and I will find things. But then I think the gold in us as safety professionals, or the gold in how we achieve safety on site, as it were, is to get into that trench with them, metaphorically speaking, clearly. So I was going to say about the balance and how it ebbs and flows, and you know, ultimately there are parts of the process that are more important to get safety right, because that creates the foundation on which we all work, isn't it? But if I'm going to site and let's say I spot 10 things, I will my mindset, and I'm actually, I don't want to put a plug in because I haven't written it yet, but I'm actually writing a book at the moment called The Power of You, Me and We. So I will very much say, you are going to need to do this, this, and this. Me, the I bit, or the me bit, I will do this bit for you, and we are going to do this bit together. So I am instantly putting myself in that position where I'm aligning myself with that person's goals. I've spotted it, and I'm gonna tell you what you need to, or I'm gonna support you and enable you to achieve what you need to achieve. And that for me is kind of how we should be operating. Obviously, that goes towards the goal of the company, saying, you know, it's our number one priority. I don't believe it is. It's a what's the word? An organisational aim, and it's as important as the profit. It's as important as the product, as it were. But it's absolutely, to tie it all together, it will happen when it needs to happen. If I'm probably not articulating myself very well there, but there's something to be said for being there at the right time and actually get involved with the outcome of safety, as it were. Because if you're not enabling them to then the workforce, as it were, the experts of what they do, because I couldn't agree more with what Kevin was saying, they're going to tell you, or others were saying, they're going to tell you where the issue is. So I probably waffled a bit there. Apologies.
No, that was good. And drop me a message about the book and when you're going to be finished with that, because I'd love to get you onto the podcast and have a chat about it. Good stuff. Well, look, guys, it's 1:45, so that's our 45 minutes. Loved today's discussion. I think we could maybe revisit this topic in a bit more detail another day as well. Just as a reminder, again, next week, 9:00 on Wednesday, the roundtable is going to be talking about the 4 Ps of a proactive safety and risk management. So the 4 big benefits you can get, the outcomes you can achieve, and look forward to delving into that one with you next week. And in the meantime, have a great week. Do take the survey, and let's be safer, or let's do things safely, or we definitely won't say safety's our number one priority anyway for the week ahead. All right, thanks everybody.